Hey guys, Jordan here. In this video, I'm gonna compare some different setups, actually Sony, Nikon, and Canon, and just give my thoughts about each. All right, so this video is not gonna go in depth for every little feature that each camera has to offer. This is just my experience as a real estate photographer and my initial experience with each, what I like about each camera. And the cameras that I was using, okay, so the Canon EOS R with the 14-35. This is the new Canon, I think it's the RF lens. The Nikon Z6 with the 14-30 millimeter Nikkor S f4 lens. So I'm holding the A7R4 or A7 IV, but the camera that's more comparable with the two bodies that I have here is probably the A7 III from a price perspective. So I'm gonna keep that camera in mind when I'm doing this review. All right, so let me start off by talking about the Canon. Now, what I really like about the Canon is the form factor. I think out of all three of these setups, I probably like how the Canon feels the best in hand, and it is the lightest as well. So I don't know what the lens is made out of. It does feel a little more plasticky. These two lenses are metal, so if we're doing body weight, I guess the body as well is made out of plastic. And yeah, it seems like the Nikon and the Sony aren't. So that would make the camera a little bit lighter, but it doesn't feel cheap. You know, I actually like how this one feels when you're out and about. And I actually like the buttons and stuff like that on here. Though I'm not super familiar with them, I haven't used this extensively. I used it to shoot a couple properties. But yeah, I do like overall this. You know, one thing, I have a couple notes here of what I picked up on the Canon. I thought it had the simplest menu to learn. Like if you're not all into trying to customize every little thing, I think the Canon has the easiest menu to follow and kind of pick up from a photographer perspective. So I really like that. And like I said before, I really like the form factor. That's what I had here. One thing that I didn't really like is that it only can take a single SD card slot, which will kind of limit you on how fast you can read and write on cards. And I know there are different bodies that you can, but for the most part, a single SD card is gonna be just fine. That's what we use out in the field, so it is nice having additional options. So that's the Canon. All right, now let me move on to the Nikon and just talk a little bit about my experience with this. Now, this one probably took the longest to kind of set up and figure out. The lenses are kind of odd too. This one's a 14-30, so it does have a wider focal length, but at 14 it like pops out and then you kind of lock it. It's interesting. It's just different than other lenses that I've used. The body I really like. I liked how big this screen was, and you know, I liked how to easily adjust certain features with this scroll button. It reminded me more of the Sony interface. It's very similar, though things are in different spots. But I did have some issues when I was shooting with it. I was shooting photos and then I went to another angle and I'm trying to get it to fire off and it wouldn't. And it took me a while to figure out what setting was messed up that was not allowing it to shutter. Ultimately, I was able to fix it by changing it from autofocus single to autofocus continuous, and that allowed me to continue the shoot. But it seemed very odd, and I don't think that was like an issue with this body. Yeah, it was just weird to have an issue like that just right off the bat. So what I really liked about the Nikon is the customizability of it. You know, the Canon and the Nikon, you can both adjust your raw image size. So typically with real estate photography, you don't need 20 or 30 or 40 megapixel images. You can get by with much smaller. So having the ability to select small raw on both of these is really nice. For me, if I was gonna go out and shoot, I really like this because there were a lot of options, and it looks like it can do continuous bracket shooting with the flash. You can do that with the Sony, but you can't use it with a TTL style flash. But anyways, it did seem like it had more options. The menu definitely has a lot of options with the Nikon. So if you like to geek out on settings, this is probably the camera for you. All right, let me talk about one more thing about this that I didn't like, that I didn't really know when I got it. Now this body is the Z6. Actually, I don't think I mentioned it. So the Nikon Z6, and the camera, I didn't realize that I had to buy a specific camera and a specific card reader. Here it is over here. So I had to buy a camera, or a proprietary. It's the XQD. None of the other cameras take this kind of card. The card was pretty expensive as well. It is a fast read-write card. And anyways, I don't have it around here somewhere. I don't know. Hopefully I didn't lose it because it did cost some money. But yeah, typically, like, I'm used to the Sonys. Like the A7 III doesn't have the ability but to have 2 dual SD card slots, but the newer one, like the A7 IV, you can use the CFast, I think Type A cards, as well as SD cards, so they don't make you choose one. And I think, yeah, okay, oh, the card is in the camera, duh. But yeah, it's bigger than an SD card slot, but it would have been nice to be able to use SD cards as well when you don't need something like this. So if a card goes bad, really I only have the one card for this camera, but usually you have a bunch of extra SD cards, so it would have been nice just to be able to have, or be able to use SD cards as well. All right, so I'm not gonna go into too much detail there, but that's just kind of my initial thoughts about the Nikon. Now I kind of gave these cameras a little bit of thought, like what would be best for whom, right? So I thought that the Canon was the best out-of-the-box shooter for a new real estate photographer that doesn't necessarily want to get all crazy into the settings. I think you'll probably have the best experience with the Canon, just to be able and be able to feel comfortable with your camera faster with this setup. The Nikon, I thought, was best for those that like to experiment with camera settings, like to try to fine-tune things and adjust things to the way that they like. For all the options that are in the menu of the Nikon, that's where I thought this camera shined, and that's where I think that type of photographer will gravitate towards that. The Sony, in my opinion, for me, was the best all-around camera, right? I'm a little bit biased towards Sony. I've used them for a long time. I still, after having experienced both of these, I still would gravitate towards the Sony. I had a better experience with HDMI outs. There's a lot of features, and it just seemed to work, have less hiccups. I had a couple exposures that were out of focus on the Nikon. Didn't have that happen on the Canon. I haven't really, this video is not necessarily about videography. I know the Sony performs very well with videography, but I did have a heck of a time with HDMI out recording my screen on the Nikon. That was because when you're shooting and then it goes to preview, it changes the resolution, and then it just like resets my monitor. So I wasn't able to fix that, but to turn off the image preview. So when I was shooting and recording at the same time to make one file. Anyways, it's just a lot easier. All right, so that is gonna do it for my just quick analysis on these cameras. Now I'm gonna be putting them through more tests. I'm gonna be shooting video on the Canon and the Nikon. I don't have too much experience with there, just to kind of get a sense for beyond photography, how do these cameras perform. And so if you're interested in learning about that, those videos are gonna be coming out, so make sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out. And yeah, I definitely think that, these cameras, although, very similar, they do have differences. They all will perform very well shooting real estate photography. I didn't have any major issues like don't use any of these ones for shooting real estate photography. they all are sufficient for real estate photography, and I think different types of photographers will gravitate towards different setups. All right guys, so that's it for my initial impressions and thoughts around the Canon, Nikon, and the Sony. If you're interested in seeing more videos about all these cameras, make sure to subscribe to the channel. I'm going to be putting out more content around all of these setups and become more familiar with all of them. So anyways, if you're interested in learning more about the real estate photography business, you can check out my free workshop. The link is in the description below. That's going to do it for this one. Reach out if you have any questions. We'll see you guys on the next one.